just before I start this tutorial, where we're going to be making these plain granny squares, I would like you to uh, maybe watch the whole tutorial first before you start making them, or at least scroll through until you get to the last section of the video, because I do explain a slight change that I've made to the squares, and it's important that you watch that part before you start making the squares. So for section 2 part 2, like I said, you've got a number of plain granny squares to make and attach them in a method called simple join as you go, which is a little bit different, almost the same but slightly different from the continuous join as you go that you used in the center. The 2 round granny square is absolutely the same as the 2 round granny square that you put into those squares in the center. So you can refer back to the instructions for that to know how to make the squares, and the pattern of course gives you the colors to make and the order to put them in. I haven't made the squares up yet, so my color is, I'm going to be doing that as I go, and then I'll be adding it to the pattern. So I know that I'm starting with the dark Air Force blue color, so that's why I've made this one up as a 2 round square. When I got to the end of my second round, I've chained 2 as if we were going to start a 3rd round, and it's actually the 3rd round which is going to be the round that attaches to the blanket. So let's have a look. We've got our 2 rounds of granny clusters, and we're going to be attaching the squares to the round, the outside edge. The join as you go, whatever type, the join as you go is always made on the same side of the blanket, the front of the blanket. So as you can see, this is the join as you go for the previous section, and you know that it's the front because there's a slight ridge on the front of the join as you go. It's flat when it's on the back, and of course we know that's the front because of the holly. But if you want to be absolutely certain, then you can put in a stitch marker, which I seem to have mislaid my box of stitch markers for the moment, so I'll put one in a minute, but I just normally put a stitch marker in the front of the blanket somewhere, one of these squares, and that gives you a clue as to what side the blanket is, the front. That's possibly more important as you get further out and you're turning the blanket at different points. So this is the front. The join as you go is always done on the front. Right, so we're not turning the blanket over after this round, it's staying on the front side of round 2. So this was the end of round 2 of my little square, and I've chained 2 and then turned, which is what we normally do. And because it's now the 3rd round is now the joining round, I'm going to revert to the half treble. So this was treble clusters for the round 1 and round 2 of the granny square. And I'm about to start round 3, and I'm starting it away from the blanket. So we're going to do a part of round 3 with the square on its own and then start attaching it. So I've done my chain 2, which is the equivalent of the first half treble, and then because it's right close to the center of the side, so there's a space in the center, I'm actually going to put 2 half trebles into that center space, and then up to this corner with 1, 2, 3 half trebles, which is the first half of the corner, and then I'm going to line it up with the corner of the blanket and put my slip stitch to make my first joining stitch into that blanket corner, and back to make the 3 half trebles. 1, 2, 3. That completes the corner of the small square. Into the next space along and a slip stitch, and then 3 half trebles. 1, 2, 3. And the next space along, 3 slip stitch, and then back to make 3 half trebles. And when we come along, you can see that it's the corner of the square. The small square is the next space to put the 3 half trebles, and then into the next space along on the blanket. Now these squares, as you can see, if I pull that apart slightly, you can see that the slip stitches for each square are 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the 4th space in the blanket is shared with the first corner of the next square, but make sure that you've done 4 slip stitches along the blanket edge of each square. If you miss a slip stitch by mistake, it's going to throw your whole row out and you'll need to pull everything back. So it's a good idea to check as you're working that you're putting a slip stitch into every space along the blanket. So we'll talk about that as we go along. I've got another 3 half trebles to go in to the corner space, and remember, as before, the slip stitch into the blanket takes the place of the 2 chains that you would normally put in the corner of a granny square. They're not put in when you're putting in the slip stitches. But we're down to the bottom corner. Now, if this was like section 1 and the continuous join as you go, you would be bringing the next square and attaching it. But in this simple join as you go, I'm going to swing this all the way round, and I'm going to finish off my blue first square as if it was just a normal granny square. So that means I've put in my 3 half trebles. I'm going to chain 2 because it's not got any slip stitches, and 3 half trebles, 2, 3, and then 3 half trebles, 2, 3, and then 3 half trebles in the final corner, 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and 3 half trebles. And then we're back to where we started round 3 of this small square. So that was the, just get the right, that was the point, the middle space where we put the chain 2 and 2 half trebles. So all we need to do now is slip stitch into the top of the chain 2, and we can cut the yarn. And that's the first square made and attached. Just, you can give it a tweak, but that's, if I pull this round back, because this will be where we'll be starting the next square, you can see that it's neatly attached. I would recommend that at this point you pull this center tight, work around and back and around again and finish it off, because you don't really want to have to do all of these centers once you get along the edge of the blanket, but that's up to you. I'm going to actually leave my center. I'll sew it in after, because I want to make my next square ready to attach, and I'll show you what happens with that. So what I'm going to do is take my next colour, and I need to make a decision which colour it's going to be because I'm ahead of the pattern when I'm doing this. So I'll make my next square up as far as the end of round 2, and I'll show you how it attaches to both square number 1 and the blanket. This is me with the second square at the same point where I showed you the joining with the first square. So I've done my 2 rounds and I've chained 2 and ready to start the third round. So you chain 2 and turn, and as before you'll find that you are at the middle space rather than a corner. So it's 2 half trebles in the middle space. The chain 2, of course, counts as the first half treble, and then we'd make the first half of the corner, 2, 3, and then we are ready to start attaching it first of all to the corner of the first square. Now this is a little bit different from the continuous join as you go. It can be a little bit confusing, but if you think about it, it makes sense. We're about to slip stitch and up the side of square number 1 at the same time as making our half treble clusters on square number 2. So we're going to treat this square like we did the beginning of the blanket. So we're going into the corner and making a slip stitch, and then back over to the green and 3 half trebles, and then into the next space up the side of the blue square, slip stitch and 3 half trebles in the center space of the green square, 2, 3, and then we should have one more space on the blue square before we get to the corner. So that's our slip stitch, and then we can put 3 half trebles into the corner of the green square for the first half of that corner, like that. I'll slip this round again, and now what we want to do here is we want to share this very same space. You don't want to go into the next space along for the corner of the green square. You're going to share the same space as square number 1. And I find if I do that with a slip stitch, the top corner of the blue square and the top corner of the green square aren't actually attached. So there is a tendency for this to gape and pull apart. To avoid that, what I prefer to do is to, let's take this back, I prefer to slip stitch into the top corner of the blue square, like that, and then at the same time slip stitch into the space in the blanket that you have already got the blue slip stitch in, and then you can finish off your corner. 1, 2, 3, slip stitch into the next space along, and 3 half trebles. And I'll show you what that join looks like, but I'll just come along with my joining along the top of this green square into the next space, and I'll just stop at that point. So you can see how neatly attached this is, and if I try to pull that apart, it's quite firmly anchored to the blue square and also slip stitched into the space in the blanket. And again, with that being number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4 slip stitches have been made. So again, like we did with the first square, you just need to work down here, make a corner, which is half treble 3, chain 2, half treble 3, and then slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2 and fasten off. And that's all you need to do. Now, the reason, some people have asked me, why don't you do the continuous join as you go for these squares? And it's because I don't want, they're small, and I don't want to make them look as if they've got an extra colour outlining them. I want them to look as if they are just joining onto each other. Absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but the only thing that stops you doing is making up a batch of squares which you can put onto your knitting needle skewer and then just pull them off one by one like we did with these. And that's because you need to make your square and attach it in the one go. I mean, if you decided that you wanted to make a 2 round square in, say, the dark blue, and then make a 2 round square in the green, and come back and join them at a later point with your individual colours, you're going to end up with extra tails to sew in. So if you just make your square, attach it, and make the next square, attach it, you soon get along the row, and it's quite nice because you're actually seeing the whole thing growing at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work along my row in the colours. I've now selected the colours that I'm going to put in this row, and you will see them in the pattern. And I'll see you when I get to the corner, because like before, it's just slightly different for getting around the corner and getting ready to go up the other side. So I'll see you when I get to this point. Hello again. Time has moved on a little. I've actually done 2 sides of my plain granny squares, and I'm stopping just to let you see how I go round the corner. You will find that this pale pink, which is what I'm going to use, appears in all 4 corners of this part of the blanket. And it's very simple. My apologies, I haven't done my ends, full disclosure, because I've been rattling on. I'm going for a bit of a car journey this afternoon. I think I'll take this with me and get the ends all sewn in while I'm the passenger, which I think will be a good use of time. So I have made my next square, and it's going to sit on the corner here. I've gone as far as the first couple of clusters of the 3rd round in the half trebles, so I've made the half of the corner, and I'm just going to swing the blanket right. I'm making an awful lot of noise off camera because I've got bits and pieces that are a bit in the way, really. Okay, so this is going to sit right here. Bring that over slightly. And as usual, you just need to slip stitch into the corner of the previous square, and then 3 half trebles in the corner of the pink square to finish it off. And the usual, there's nothing complicated about this, just the usual slip stitch 3 half trebles combo. By the way, I meant to mention this. I'll go back to this part of the side. I think I bang on about this on every pattern where I've got squares joining along the side of a blanket. So many people who make a mistake come to me and say, well, first of all, they don't always think it's their mistake. Sometimes they think it's the counting of the blanket that's wrong, but it's not. They might find that they have put in their last square, but it doesn't quite fit. There might just be 3 spaces to work into instead of the 4, which means that their last square is jutting out. This happens, this is possibly the most common problem that people contact me about. And the simple answer is that somewhere along the edge, they have missed a space in the blanket and there isn't a slip stitch in it. So be careful, check as you go along, maybe every couple of squares, just check that you've got a slip stitch in every space in the blanket. In fact, 2 in some of the spaces, but there's not a space that's empty, because if there is, your squares are not going to fit and you have to take it back. So it's better to check every 2 or 3 squares than to do the whole thing and find that maybe the mistake is right back at the first square. Okay, back on with this. So it's a slip stitch and into the corner with 3 half trebles. And this is slightly different from fitting your corners into the one space in the blanket. This is more like when you did the joins in the center. You've got 2 spaces. You can, if you like, just do what we did here and slip stitch into this space and also the space in the blanket, or you can just go straight into the space in the blanket, because there will be another square coming up and it can go diagonally into the space in the square, if you know what I mean. I think that's what I'll do. I'm going to just slip stitch into the corner space of the blanket, leaving this without a slip stitch in it, because there will be one goes into it when we make this square. So then just swing it round and finish off your pink as usual. And that's giving you an edge ready to start the next side of the blanket. These squares don't take long to work up, and there aren't too many ends to sew in since they're all one colour. Of course, I put the 2 chains in that corner because it's an open corner. By that I mean there's no slip stitch, there's no join. And the same here, chain 2 and 3 half trebles. And then you can slip stitch and finish off. Oops. If you find the top of the chain 2 a little bit tricky to get your hook into, you can go into the top of the first treble stitch. And there is my first square. It's a little bit, it needs a bit of a push, but it's into shape. And that's the first square ready to start going down this side. So I'll swing everything round. And when I come to put the first square, which is the dark blue, in here, it will slip stitch diagonally into this corner. And that will hold both corners nice and firmly. So I will continue round the other 2 sides of this part, and I'll be back to show you what happens next very soon. Okay, sometimes a crochet designer can get something wrong. In fact, quite a lot is, in my case, it's quite a lot of times I can get something wrong. And I have made a decision about the piece that I've just made, and I want for full disclosure to explain where I think I've gone wrong, and this will head you off at the pass so that you don't go wrong. I have completed this section 2. I've gone round all 4 sides. I've sewn in the ends in the middle, but I've left my ends on the outside because I've explained before that's my preference. I like to leave these until I've done the next part. So this afternoon my job was to make a start on the next part, and I have an idea in my head what I'm going to do. I am going to do some rounds of granny stripes, but I will bring in a bit of a holly motif as I'm doing it. That's my plan. Now, obviously, with these small squares, we have a join between the squares. After every 2 spaces, there's a part where there's a join. And when I was, where was I? When I was joining along this part, if you'll remember, I was experimenting with putting the 3 trebles into the space between the squares, and it's fine, it's nice and flat. So I started doing that here, but there is an element of kind of bumpiness. It's like you've got a corner which is slightly more elevated than another corner. Not always, but in quite a few cases. Let's see if I can find another one. Here, there's another one. And of course, there's a reason for that. And the reason is that because, as I told you when we were making the squares, that when we were attaching them, joining them with the join as you go stitch, where there was a corner that had a slip stitch into the other corner, I wouldn't put any chains in, so that it would just be straightforward, a straightforward slip stitch. And that's fine. That's fine when you're doing something that's all involving continuous join as you go. But it's slip stitching into a corner which has got 2 chains, and that's why we've got this discrepancy in the edge, along the edge. So you've got this one here which has no chains in, so it's a tight corner, and then the looser corner with the 2 chains. So I guess there are 2 options. There's the option for missing out the chains in the corner, which I don't really think is an option, or putting 2 chains in as well as the slip stitch. So if I can find it, this is what I've done. I've picked back my last square, which is the pale pink, and if you look closely you can see that I have put 2 chains in before I put in the slip stitch. So it was 3 half trebles, chain 2, slip stitch, and 3 half trebles. And what's happened is that you're getting 2 balanced corners, and that will be much neater when it comes to adding the next round. So this is just, I'm slipping this into the video. It'll obviously be in the pattern, so you will have your chain 2 and then the slip stitch, and that keeps a much neater edge. I've made an executive decision not to pull all this back. I'll just ride it through. It means that my edge might be a little bit bumpy, but I think it's worth it just to keep going. So you'll have a much flatter edge than I do. And we'll move on in just a second to section 3.